Our department is hurting. We're grieving the loss of our brother. And while we stand behind and support his loved ones and our injured brother and sister officer who are in their own fight after this senseless evil act. But despite our hurt, despite our grief, as a department, as a city, and as a family, we will keep fighting. We will not be deterred from our mission. Fighting for our fallen, for what is right, and for this city. We honor our fallen and our injured heroes by continuing our mission every day. Yes, we have tough days ahead, but we will get through it as we always do, together and as a law enforcement family.
That is Dallas Police Department Chief of Police Eddie Garcia. And that brings, that tickles me. That is a very, very emotional moment to hear a chief of police. It's a dark day, by the way, on the death of Dallas police officer. He's a rookie, Darren Burks, 46 years old. He was killed last night at between 10 and 11 by a perpetrator. I'm not going to use the guy's name because he doesn't deserve the publicity. And unfortunately, today, Chief Garcia had to face his force and their families and the media to explain what's going on. So as he grieves with his peers, as he has to put on his leadership hat, as he has to face the cameras, as he has to face the microphone and answer some questions. Imagine being the chief of police and watching that police camera video. He said in that press conference earlier today he was not going to share the execution because he didn't want to share that, rightly so. But imagine being the boss. Put yourself in a work environment and having to go through and watch the video of one of your fallen, one of your comrades, one of your peers, one of your direct reports being executed. I couldn't imagine watching that. No wonder he teared up through that emotion. My name is Jeff. It's Westside Jeff, sitting in for Chris Crock. I'd love to hear your take on all this, your opinion on the events of the day, and what do you think? My phone number is 800-288-9227, 800-288-WBAP. You can also hit me up on social media at Westside Jeff, on Facebook, on X, on Instagram. I have a lot of thoughts. Let me whip through them. First and foremost, my immediate thought is, from my knowledge of what's going on in Dallas Police Department, they're understaffed. We talked to a retired officer a moment ago, Mike from Royce City, that said he retired in 2018. When he was in the force, they were trying to get to about 4,000 officers. He hears there's somewhere around 3,000. I have some insiders that told me it may be as low as 2,500. Don't know that we know the exact number. Don't know we'll ever get the exact number. But we need more officers on the street. Why don't we have more officers on the street? We don't have more officers on the street because who wants to be a cop these days? Any more in this environment, any more in the last couple years, on the heels of what we went through with the George Floyd scenario up in Minneapolis, the federal government from the top down has put an era and promoted an agenda, promoted a narrative up, a national narrative, that if you are a police officer, you're guilty until proven innocent. Yet you and I as citizens are innocent until proven guilty. Do you want to be a cop knowing that you're going to be guilty until proven innocent? I wouldn't, especially in major metropolitan cities. Now, these are the kinds of stories I expect to hear out of New York, out of Chicago, out of LA, but this hits home to us right here in Dallas. It's not a story I ever woke up and thought, geez, I'll talk about one of our police officers being executed, being assassinated, being targeted because the uniform he wears, because the badge on his chest, and because of a marked car he sat in. Not because he's just a regular citizen sitting in a car. He was targeted for being a police officer. We'll get more details as time goes on about this, but the chief had even said that this perpetrator in the last week or so went up to a couple other officers somewhere else and videotaped his interaction with them. The man was targeted, and the man paid the ultimate price, not knowing what was coming. My questions for you: how do you feel as a resident of Dallas? How do you feel as a resident of North Texas? Are you honored to be in a city represented by a guy like Eddie Garcia? I got to tell you something. In a lot of cities across this country, on the events of what happened in the last 24 hours here, the mayor and the city council would never let the police chief take the lead on that. He would be a part, or she would be a part of the conversation. There'd be a press conference and the mayor would take lead, or the city council president would take lead, and the chief of police would be behind them and say a few words. But this was the chief of police's press conference. This was not someone else's press conference. He was the lead on this. And that tells you a lot. That tells you the support he has from the mayor and hopefully the city council. And I think that speaks volumes about his support for his officers and their families. How would you like to be a police officer today in today's environment? Dallas is a little different than other cities, but there are some cities that you're not supported. And how does today's assassination of a Dallas Police Department officer impact recruiting? How does it impact recruiting in Dallas at the DPD? But what about other departments in surrounding communities? What about McKinney? What about Granbury? What about Plano? What about some of the other communities in our area? How does this impact recruitment for those areas? How much does a police officer make? Well, I went to the Dallas Police Department website. The starting pay is $70,314. An officer can make, around it, from $70,000 to almost $92,000 a year, plus benefits and incentive pays. The senior corporal can make $89,000 to $100,000 a year. A sergeant, $102,000 to $110,000 a year, and a lieutenant, $113,000 to $122,000 a year. The income doesn't sound like a significant problem, but as Mike, a retired officer, said to us, 14% of that pay goes into their pension. So that's not take-home pay once you pay taxes, other withholdings. I don't know how much that is. I haven't done the math. But the income, starting income, and the rest of the incomes don't sound out of whack for me. It doesn't sound unusual to me. But what does stick out to me when we talk to Mike, a former Dallas police officer who retired in 2018, he said part of the reason a lot of officers left the force is because of the pension, which was mismanaged. And I asked him very specifically, is that fixed? And he said, no. It's got to get fixed. This is where the media have got to speak. If you're an officer, a former officer, you can use a fake name. I don't care. You don't have to out yourself. I'd love to hear from people in law enforcement. I'd love to hear from people whose family members of law enforcement. Are you feeling supported? How do you feel the support from the mayor, from the chief of police, and the city council impacts what you do? And how does that impact recruitment? How does that impact the safety that you deliver across our community? My name is Jeff. It's Westside Jeff. I'm sitting in for Chris Kroc. My phone number is 800-288-9227. 800-288-WBAP. I'd like to hear from people in law enforcement and their families. And again, if you don't want to speak up and be recognized on the radio with your name, give me a different name. I don't care. But I think it's important to hear from the force, from the rank and file, from others in law enforcement about the support you're getting from the community, the support you're getting from your leadership, and the support you're getting from government entities, your government leadership. 800-288-9227. 800-288-WBAP. I'll be back in about 3 minutes. The name is Jeff. It's Westside Jeff. In for Chris Kroc on News Talk 820. WBAP and now on FM 93.3.
But as a department and as a family, we are devastated. Last night, we lost a brother, a hero. Officer Darren Burks was a son, a nephew, a friend to many, and he was senselessly and tragically murdered in the line of duty. We came close to losing other officers who put their lives on the line to protect their brother, and it is by the grace of God they are still with us today. Our officers were targeted for nothing more than the uniform they wear and for the brave and honorable job that they do. I do want to make something clear. I know that the word ambush has been thrown around in the last 24 hours or so. That's not what happened here. Officer Burks was executed.
Officer Burks was executed. He was assassinated. That was Eddie Garcia, chief of police, at a press conference just a little while ago about the events from last night and sharing the news of a very dark day today in Dallas. My name is Jeff. It's West Side Jeff in for Chris Kroc. Chris is back on Tuesday night. These are always difficult moments to have a conversation when one of our own, a fallen officer, is executed. He didn't die just by old age. Listen, he was executed. He was specifically targeted. This was premeditated. And unfortunately, the police department is in mourning. So it's just a tough time. It's a very tough time for our law enforcement and a very tough time for our community. I got a lot of friends in policing, and I don't want to out them because many of them struggle to share what really goes on because of fear of retribution. Don't know that's the case here because I don't know enough of them here in Dallas. But I've made notes for a while about some of the things I've heard from officers. I'd love to hear your input on what you think. I'd love to hear your opinion on safety in our community. I'd like to hear your opinion on how you feel leadership has handled this in the last 12 hours. I'd like to hear what you think potential solutions are. 800-288-9227. That's the phone number. You can hit me up on cross social media at Westside Jeff. Again, it's 800-288-WBAP. Couple open phone lines. Let's get to Jay from Crowley. Jay, thanks for listening to the show and thanks for calling in. What's your immediate thoughts on today?
Hey, Jeff. How you doing this evening, my friend?
Thanks for calling.
Hey, as the son of a police officer here in Arlington, Texas, my father was a police officer for 30-plus years in Arlington, and I consider every police officer in North Texas brothers and sisters. This is heartbreaking. Chief Garcia he's probably a great guy. He's got he's got to deal with his officers, the community. He's got to deal with the city, the reporting to the federal government. We get all that crap stuff. I'm sorry. And the heartfelt of losing a brother, this runs deep. And I don't know this officer. This as a family of officers, this runs deep. And as a citizen of North Texas, I hate to see this. This has gotten out of control. This is something that just we can't fathom the pain that happens between the police department, the community. I got a little choked up just listening to the interview myself. I'm sorry.
Pretty powerful audio, isn't it?
Yes, sir. 100%. And as I'm driving through downtown Fort Worth and I see police officers sitting on the side of the road doing their job and going through these neighborhoods, and just the thought that anything could happen to one of these guys or gals protecting our city, just sitting in their squad car, and the the evil that someone could do to one of these officers that may just be sitting there taking a coffee break for all we know. It's an unbearable thought.
Jay, thank you for feeling so compelled to call in tonight and voicing your opinion. I appreciate it very much. Thank you. That was Jay. You too. That was Jay from Crowley. If you'd like to weigh in, a couple open phone lines at 800-288-9227, 800-288-WBAP. What does this say about recruitment in the law enforcement field? The name is Jeff. It's Westside Jeff. A couple thoughts on this. First and foremost is there's a side. Would you support your family member going into law enforcement? And for those of you that do have it, how do you feel? How do you get through that? How do you adjust every time they walk out the door and hope they come back? Boy, it's just a tough night. My immediate thought, by the way, is this. There's a side of me that thinks I could make an argument it would be safer to be in the military, to join the military, than to go into the police department. Safer in the military than in the police department. I could make that argument. I'll make it right after the news. Coming up at the bottom of the hour, I've got Lori Waffenschmidt in the newsroom, and she's got an update on conditions of travel for Labor Day across our community that affects those of you that are traveling over the Labor Day weekend. The name is Jeff. It's Westside Jeff. If you'd like to weigh in, 800-288-9227, 800-288-WBAP. Again, coming up about 4 minutes, we've got Lori Waffenschmidt in the newsroom. On the other side of that, I will make an argument that instead of there is an attack on our police officers in this country, and the attack comes the rhetoric by the Biden administration, by the Obama administration, by federal government from the top down has been going on for several years in this country. And that is a very significant part of the reason why recruitment is down in police departments across the country, not just here in Dallas, not just in our local area, but across the country. And it makes it tougher to recruit. It makes it tougher to hire. It makes it tougher to train. And it comes down to this. And my opinion is that the Constitution says that you and I, as citizens of this country, are all innocent until we are proven guilty. But the media and the federal government say that if you're a cop, you're guilty until proven innocent. And that's why I'll make an argument in about 7 minutes right after the news. It might be safer to go in the military than public service as a police officer. I'll tell you why I say that coming up about 7 minutes. Got the news coming up next at 3 minutes. On the other side of that, I'll make that argument. My name is Jeff. It's Westside Jeff. 800-288-9227, 800-288-WBAP. Back right after the news. Westside Jeff in for Chris Crock on News Talk 820 WBAP and now on FM at 93.3.
As I said earlier, our officers were targeted by this coward. Our detectives have learned from social media that 3 days ago, Cobb Bay approached an unmarked squad car of an unknown law enforcement agency and recorded as he questioned the officers about why they were parked there. He expressed problems with his personal and professional life online. And 1 day ago, he made a post indicating an event was happening on Friday. The investigation determined last night was premeditated, again for no other reason than the uniform we wear, that my men and women proudly wear.
That was Eddie Garcia, Chief of Police in Dallas City Police Department, Chief of Police today, just not long ago at a press conference, explaining the scenario that occurred late last night and the death of one of his officers. And the officer, 46-year-old Darren Burke. Burke's 46 years old, killed by a perpetrator, a bad, evil person. 2 other officers were injured. Corporal Jamie Farmer and Senior Corporal Carissa David were also injured in the shooting. as Dallas police chief said, 1 officer killed, 2 injured in the targeted attack. That's an assassination attempt is what that is. That's what that is. That's an assassination. Listen, the name is Jeff. It's West Side Jeff. In for Chris Kroc. Chris is back next Tuesday. I can tell you this. The police work has been in for a rough road, rough treatment for the last 4 to 6 years or so. Our culture, the cultural moment we are in today, has put a spotlight on policing in America. And politicians haven't done anything to help it when they talk about defund the police. Policing has to look different. They want them to dress up in little costumes, go away and go around and make friends. Police officers were once revered as heroes. They once were afforded broad respect in our communities for the sacrifices that they make, for the commitments they make. They were given some deference and regard in exchange for the long hours, the low pay, the danger. You can't make a fortune as a police officer. You can't make the money as a police officer you can in other private sectors. Yet the danger is always lurking at the next call. But the one thing you don't expect as a police officer is to be wearing your uniform, sitting in your police car, have an individual, deranged individual, come up and talk to you, record it on their phone, pull out a gun and assassinate you, and videotape it. That's what you don't expect. And that's what occurred late last night. And that's what Eddie Garcia is talking about today. Police officers at one time were heroes. We saw them on TV shows. They were portrayed as heroes. Cop shows. Hell, I grew up with top cop shows. I remember not only cop shows, but trick or treat time. A lot of times, kids would dress as firefighters or mostly police officers. I don't see that I used to see at one time, because our government, our federal government, has put a bad light on police officers. They've in essence told us that you and I, as citizens of the United States, the law affords us an air of innocence until a jury of our peers finds us guilty. But if you're a police officer, you're guilty until we can prove, or you can prove, your innocence. And that's wrong. The commitment they make is significant, and you never know when your last cup of coffee is your last cup of coffee. I could make the argument, I told you a moment ago, that it would be safer to join the military. It might be safer, and here's why. At least when you're in the military, if you're thinking of public service, listen, you don't go to be you don't sign up to be a cop because you can get rich. You don't sign up to be a cop because of any other reason, for the most part, than public service. The commitment to public service, the commitment to safety, the commitment to defending our community, the commitment to protecting our community. Very similar to the commitment you make when you sign up for the military. But see, in the military, your workspace, your work environment, your workplace, more often than not, tends to be, unless you're in wartime and in the theater, as they call it, tends to be on a base. And bases in the military have perimeters. You can't just go on to any base in this country. You can't just drive up, and like that occurred last night. The most deranged person can't walk up to a base, walk into the work environment of someone with them in the military, videotape it, and pull a gun and shoot you. That doesn't happen because of the multiple perimeters it takes to get on bases. But police officers don't have those perimeters. They are the perimeter. And unfortunately, we lost one last night who was assassinated, who was executed. I got a lot of friends in law enforcement. I've talked to a lot of them. I've asked them a lot of questions. And over some time, I've collected some thoughts. And some of the thoughts are this: that the anti-cop rhetoric by the Biden administration has made things worse for cops. Law enforcement in general, overall, are there bad cops? Yes. They're bad talk show hosts. They're bad waiters. They're bad TV personalities. They're bad sales guys in insurance. They're bad guys that sell cars. There are bad ones everywhere. But by and law, in general, law enforcement does a great job. And they're in it for the right reasons. In the world of law enforcement, law-abiding citizens don't have encounters with law enforcement. Usually those who have engagement with law enforcement in negative situations are people breaking the law. Yet the media have spent the last 4 or 5 years turning people who break the law, they've turned them into victims of the law. And that has reinforced a backlash, an outcry against the police. I continually hear across communities about policing by PR or PR policing. I talked to a cop, actually a chief of police, who said to me, I run a department, he said, I don't want my cops wearing Santa hats. I don't want them selling hot dogs. I don't want them giving out gifts and trying to make the community like you. The community will love you when the community feels safe. It's not racial profiling or socioeconomic profiling. We criminal profile. We don't do it by race. We don't do it by gender. We don't do it by ethnicity. We don't do it by religion. We don't do it by sexual orientation. We do it based off of criminality. We've got all kinds of statistics, and that statistics leads us to policing. You see, community policing works only after your streets are safe. Community policing is okay, is what he said. I agree with that. But it only works when the streets are safe. Police work, arresting bad guys comes first, then community engagement should follow. We need to get past this stage of tolerating crime and back to prosecuting crime. And something tells me the events of last night are a byproduct of the anti-policing rhetoric that this country has seen and experienced over the last 4 or 6 years. And that's got to stop. Because today, last night, it hit the city in which we love. It hit the city in which we live. It hit the city in which we have marriage, kids, schools, families, and crime. And we've got to get past that. We got to get back to we got to get rid of the anti-cop rhetoric, and we got to get back to policing and eliminating crime on our streets. And when a guy targets a cop, when a guy specifically goes after a cop and tries to befriend him and videotapes it, pulls a gun and shoots him and murders him, assassinates him on the street, that's not acceptable. Our city is in mourning. Our community is in mourning. You got an opinion? I'd love to hear it. 800-288-9227, 800-288-WBAP. My name is Jeff. It's Westside Jeff, and for Chris Crocker, News Talk 820 WBAP, and now at FM at 93.3.
Our preliminary investigation has determined that on Thursday, August 29th at 10:02 p.m., the suspect, identified as 30-year-old Corey Cobb Bay, a black male, arrived in the 900 block of East Ledbetter Drive and parked his white Buick. At 10:04, Officer Burks arrived at the location and parked near the front entrance of the building between call assignments. Cobb Bay approached Officer Burks and talked with him briefly through the driver's side window as he recorded the encounter with a cell phone. The suspect then pulled out a handgun and executed Officer Burks as he sat in his vehicle.
That was Chief Eddie Garcia earlier, just about a couple hours ago, doing a presser with an update on the events of last night of the execution, the assassination of a Dallas Police Department officer, Officer Burks, 46 years old. He was shot, executed. As he said, he was very targeted. And Darren Burks, officer, 46 years old, killed by a perpetrator. 2 other officers were injured and still in the hospital. I understand that is Jamie Farmer and Carissa David. My opinion is, Jeff is the name, Westside Jeff, and for Chris Crock, my opinion is events like this don't surprise me that they're going on across our country. And it's not relegated just to Dallas. But it does surprise me a little bit it's happening in North Texas. I expect these kinds of stories in cities like New York and Chicago, LA. But this is a city we live in. This is our home. This is a city a lot of people vacation to. This is a community in which we choose to live here. This is a community in which we send our kids to school here. This is a community in which we enjoy going out and enjoying the city, the community, and all that it has to offer. And I hate to see this happening in my backyard. 800-288-9227, 800-288-WBAP is the phone number. My name is Jeff, Westside Jeff, and for Chris Crock. Chris is back next Tuesday night. Some thoughts on how we got here is the anti-cop rhetoric from the federal government and from many in public office has led to this, because they have in several areas, in several ways, those in public office have specifically gone out over the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years and made police officers the bad guys, have guilted the police, have reinforced corruption within the police department, making it sound like all cops are bad cops. Now, law enforcement in general are great. Law enforcement people are well trained and they execute flawlessly. The majority of them, overwhelmingly majority of them. But there's a few bad ones. But law enforcement, as far as policing in our community, every time I see stories about media folks or people in public office questioning a police officer, I hearken back to the thought that, in general, law-abiding citizens don't have encounters with law enforcement. If you're having encounters with law enforcement, generally, it's because their perception, that you're not obeying the law. And if you obey the law, you don't have a problem. But the media have spent the last 3, 4, 5 years turning people who break the law into victims of the law. I continually hear from cops that departments around the country, not necessarily here in Dallas, but maybe some of our communities, are all about PR policing by PR. I had a chief of police say to me, I don't want my officers wearing Santa hats. I don't want them out selling hot dogs. I don't want them out giving gift cards and trying to make the community like them. The community will love us when the community feels safe. And once the community feels safe and they love us, then it's okay to go out and integrate in the community and do some policing by PR. Police work and arresting bad guys comes first, then community engagement should follow. We need to get past the stage of tolerating crime. We got to get prosecutors who prosecute it. We've got to get bad guys off the street and keep them off the street. You know, Rudy Giuliani, when he took over in mayor in New York City, I don't know if you remember this or not, but New York City was a mess. The crime rate in New York was horrendous. But he turned it around in New York by focusing on low-level crimes. Rudy at the time found that many of the low-level crimes, I'm talking about forgeries, low-level assaults, fraud, prostitution, DUIs, disorderly conduct, those kinds of things, those offenders had warrants out for their arrest. So when you don't attack low-level crimes, you send a message of acceptance and that committing these low-level crimes is all right. Low-level offenses lead to illegal guns, lead to gangs, and lead to other crimes. And when you stop cracking down on that is when you start having lawlessness in your community. You got to support law enforcement. I do. Community policing is fine. Let's make our communities feel safe. Let's get behind them. Let's support them. And let's support our police department at this time through what they're going through.